The crystal chandeliers sparkled above us as the waiters moved silently through the private dining room. My father's 60th birthday dinner was supposed to be a celebration, but I felt the familiar knot tightening in my stomach. Mason sat across from me, perfectly composed in his tailored suit, while I fidgeted with the napkin in my lap. Dad stood up, wine glass in hand, his face flushed with pride. He talked about legacy, about success, about the son who made him proud. Then his eyes landed on me. The warmth disappeared. Mason's closing another deal next week, he announced to the table of relatives and business partners. Sometimes I wonder if Harper even understands what ambition looks like. His words hit me like a slap. You'll never be as successful as Mason's sweetheart. Maybe that's just how it is. The room went silent. Forks paused midair. My chest burned with humiliation. I felt 20 pairs of eyes on me, watching, judging, pitying. My hands trembled as I placed my napkin on the table. I stood up slowly, grabbed my purse and walked out. Nobody stopped me. The shame followed me like a shadow, but something else burned hotter underneath it. Rage. The parking lot was cold and empty. I leaned against my car, my breath coming in short gasps. My heart hammered against my ribs. The valet gave me a concerned look, but I waved him away. I needed a moment to myself. The tears I'd been holding back threatened to spill over, but I refused to let them fall. Not here. Not where someone might see. I stared up at the building where my family still sat, probably already moving on from my dramatic exit. Probably relieved I was gone. My hands shook as I fumbled for my keys. Then I said it. Out loud. For the first time in my life. My name is Harper Dawson, and I'm done being the family disappointment. The words hung in the cold air. They felt powerful. Liberating. Terrifying. I repeated them louder this time. A promise to myself. I didn't know exactly how yet, but I was going to build something. Something real. Something of mine. Something that would prove every single one of them wrong. I wasn't going to argue with my father anymore. I wasn't going to beg for his approval. I was going to show him. The engine roared to life and I drove away from that restaurant with a decision burning in my chest. The memories came flooding back as I drove. I was 8 years old, sitting in the bleachers while Mason scored the winning goal. Dad lifted him onto his shoulders, shouting with pride. I'd scored a goal the week before in my own game, but Dad had been traveling for work. When I told him about it, he just patted my head and said, "That's nice, honey." Mason's trophies lined the mantel at home. Mine were in a box in the garage. At 12, Mason made the honor roll. Dad took us all out to dinner. When I made the honor roll the next semester, he nodded and said, "Good job. Try to keep up with your brother." Every achievement was measured against Mason. Every accomplishment was somehow less. Dad called Mason the legacy. He called me the sensitive one. It was code for weak, emotional, impractical. One night when I was 12, I told Dad I wanted to start my own business someday. He laughed, not unkindly but dismissively. "Be realistic, Harper. You're not built like your brother. Mason has drive. You're more of a dreamer." Those words stayed with me. They became the voice in my head every time I tried something new. Every time I failed, I heard him saying I wasn't built for success. I'd been hiding a dream for 3 years. It started when I was walking through an old, forgotten neighborhood on the east side of town. The houses were beautiful once. You could see it in the architecture, the wide porches, the detailed molding. But they'd been abandoned, left to rot. Most people saw blight. I saw the possibility. I wanted to restore these places. Not into expensive condos or luxury apartments, but into affordable creative workspaces. Studios for artists. Offices for small businesses. Spaces where people with big dreams but small budgets could build something real. I'd spent months researching, sketching designs, running numbers. I kept notebooks full of ideas under my bed. But I never told my family. How could I? Dad would laugh. Mason would smirk. Mom would give me that worried look she always did when I talked about anything ambitious. So I kept it quiet. A secret dream I nursed alone late at night. But now, driving home from that humiliating dinner, something shifted. I was tired of hiding. Tired of making myself small to avoid their judgment. If they were going to think I was a failure anyway, I might as well fail at something I actually cared about. I pulled into my apartment complex and made a decision. I was going to start. Quietly. Carefully. But I was going to start. The community development meeting was held in a cramped room at the Civic Center. I'd prepared for weeks. My pitch was solid. I had numbers, projections, examples from other cities. My hands shook as I stood in front of the room, but I pushed through. I explained my vision. Abandoned homes restored into affordable creative spaces. Economic revitalization. Community building. When I finished, there was a moment of silence. Then a man in the front row leaned back in his chair and smirked. He was older, probably Dad's age, with that same dismissive expression I'd seen my whole life. "Sounds cute," he said, voice dripping with condescension. "But cute doesn't pay mortgages. This is real estate, honey. It's unrealistic." A few people nodded. Someone changed the subject. I smiled politely, thanked everyone for their time, and walked out with my head high. I made it to my car before the tears came. Hot, angry tears that blurred my vision. I gripped the steering wheel and let myself cry. Let myself feel the humiliation. But underneath the hurt, something harder was forming. A stubborn determination. They could doubt me. They could dismiss me. But I refused to quit. I wiped my face, started the engine, and drove home. Tomorrow I'd figure out my next move. Mason showed up at my apartment unannounced 3 weeks later. He had a key I'd given him years ago for emergencies. I was working at my kitchen table, concept sketches spread across the surface. Floor plans. Before and after renderings. Budget breakdowns. I heard the door open and scrambled to cover everything, but he was already walking in. "Hey, just wanted to drop off Mom's casserole dish. She said you borrowed it last." He stopped. His eyes landed on my sketches. I watched his expression shift from curiosity to amusement. He picked up one of my drawings, studying it with that infuriating big brother smirk. "What's this? Are you doing arts and crafts now?" "It's a project I'm working on," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. He laughed. Actually, I laughed. "You? Real estate? Harper, come on. This is way out of your league." He set the drawing down and shook his head like I was a child playing dress up. "Stick to hobbies, okay? Leave the business stuff to people who know what they're doing." He left the casserole dish on the counter and walked out. I stood there, frozen, staring at my sketches. Then I grabbed my laptop. There was a weekend renovation course starting next month. I signed up immediately, paid the deposit, and committed to learning everything I needed to know. The property listing showed up on a Thursday. It was a mess. Broken windows, overgrown yard, sagging porch. The photos made it look like a haunted house. Most investors wouldn't touch it. Too much work. Too risky. The neighborhood was rough. But I saw past all that. The bones were good. High ceilings. Original hardwood floors underneath the grime. A massive backyard. The location was perfect. Right on the edge of a neighborhood that was slowly gentrifying. I could get it cheap. I called the listing agent immediately. She was surprised that anyone was interested. We scheduled a walkthrough for Saturday. Standing inside that house, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. Excitement. This could work. This could really work. The agent asked if I wanted to think about it. I didn't need to think. I made an offer that afternoon. Full asking price, cash. I was draining my entire savings account. Every penny I'd scraped together from my boring office job. Every birthday check from my grandmother. If this failed, I'd have nothing. But if I didn't try, I'd always wonder. 3 days later, the offer was accepted. The house was mine. I sat in my car outside the property, staring at the key in my hand, and felt terrified and exhilarated all at once. Dad found out 2 weeks after closing. I don't know how. Maybe Mason told him. Maybe he heard it from someone in town. He showed up at my apartment on a Sunday morning, waving a printed copy of the property listing. His face was red. "What the hell is this?" He slammed the paper on my kitchen counter. "You drained your savings for this dump?" I stayed calm. "It's an investment property." "An investment?" He laughed bitterly. "Harper, this is insane. You don't know the first thing about real estate. Mason would never do something this stupid." There was Mason again. The golden standard I could never meet. "It's a side project," I lied. "Something to keep me busy." But even as I said it, I knew I was lying to myself too. This wasn't a side project. This was everything. He ranted for another 10 minutes about responsibility and common sense and wasted potential. Then he left, shaking his head like I was a lost cause. I locked the door behind him and leaned against it. My heart pounded. But I was already committed. The renovation starts tomorrow. There was no turning back now even if I wanted to. And I didn't want to. Not anymore. 3 weeks into renovations I got a call from a family friend. Mrs. Patterson had known us since we were kids. She sounded uncomfortable. Harper, honey, I thought you should know. Mason's been talking. My stomach dropped. Talking about what? About you. He's telling people you're having a quarter-life crisis. That you made some impulsive decisions and the family's worried about you. I closed my eyes. Of course he was. I should have expected this. He's making it sound like you're unstable, she continued. I just thought you should know. I don't believe it, but people are talking. I thanked her and hung up. I sat in my gutted living room surrounded by dust and debris and felt the anger burn. Mason was sabotaging me. Spreading rumors. Trying to make sure I'd fail before I even got started. Part of me wanted to call him. To scream. To defend myself. But another part, the part that was getting stronger every day, knew better. Words wouldn't matter. Only results would. So I picked up my hammer and went back to work. Let him talk. Let them all talk. I'd prove them wrong with actions, not arguments. The breakthrough came on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. A woman named Carla knocked on the door of the half-finished property. She owned a small pottery studio downtown and was being priced out by rising rents. I heard about what you're doing here, she said, looking around at the exposed beams and fresh drywall. This is exactly what small business owners like me need. We talked for an hour. I showed her the plans, the projected rent prices, and the community vision. Her eyes lit up. I want in, she said. I want to be your first tenant. And I know others who'd be interested. 2 weeks later she came back with a check. My first real investor. She committed to a year lease before the space was even finished. I deposited that check and felt something shift. This was real. Someone believed in my vision. Someone was willing to bet on me. I called my contractor and expanded the timeline. If Carla was interested, others would be too. I wasn't just renovating a house anymore. I was building something bigger. That night, I treated myself to takeout and sat in my unfurnished space, imagining what it would become. The annual family gathering was held at my parents' house. I almost didn't go. But I'd promised Mom weeks earlier and I couldn't bring myself to disappoint her. Mason arrived first, fresh off some successful deal. Everyone congratulated him. Dad stood up during dinner and gave another one of his speeches. I'm so proud of Mason, he announced. He's the only child with real ambition. The only one carrying on the family legacy. He didn't look at me. I didn't need to. The message was clear. I sat quietly eating my food while everyone toasted to Mason's success. My aunt asked about my little project. I gave a vague answer. Nobody pressed. They weren't really interested. After dinner I excused myself early. Nobody tried to stop me. But before I drove away I sat in my car and pulled out my phone. An email from my real estate lawyer. The second property I'd been negotiating for had just been approved. Another abandoned house bigger than the first. More potential. I signed the digital documents right there in my parents' driveway while they celebrated Mason inside. The irony wasn't lost on me. They had no idea what I was building while they dismissed me. The grand opening of my first restored property was on a Saturday in October. I'd sent invitations to local businesses, community leaders, and the press. I didn't tell my family. The turnout exceeded every expectation. Lines of people waited to tour the spaces. Artists. Entrepreneurs. Small business owners. Everyone wanted to see what I'd created. The local newspaper sent a photographer. A reporter interviewed me about the vision behind the project. By the end of the day I had 5 signed leases and a waiting list. My phone buzzed constantly with messages of congratulations and inquiries. For the first time in my life I felt successful. Genuinely successful. Not compared to Mason. Not measured against anyone else. Just me standing in something I'd built from nothing. That night Dad sent a text. Just 2 lines. Saw the article. Don't get ahead of yourself. I stared at those words for a long time. Then I deleted the message and went to bed. His disapproval didn't sting like it used to. I had proof now. Proof that I could do this. Proof that I was capable. His opinion was becoming irrelevant. Mason's sudden interest in real estate started about a month later. He called me out of nowhere, acting friendly. Too friendly. Hey, so I've been thinking about your project, he said. It's actually pretty interesting. Tell me more about how you structured everything. I was cautious but answered his questions. He sounded supportive. Encouraging even. He asked about my investors, my contractors, and my financial model. I shared some details but kept the important stuff vague. Something felt off. 2 weeks later I got a call from Carla. "Harper, this is awkward, but your brother reached out to me. He said he was working on a similar project and wanted to partner up." My blood ran cold. "What did you tell him?" I said no, obviously. "You're my landlord. But I thought you should know." I thanked her and immediately called my other investors. 3 of them reported the same thing. Mason had contacted them, pitching a version of my concept, trying to pull them into his own project. He was copying me, trying to steal my idea. But more than that, he was trying to steal my investors, my network, everything I'd built. I was furious, but I was also determined. He could try to replicate what I'd done, but he didn't have my vision, and he was about to learn that the hard way. I called my biggest investor, a retired businessman named Mr. Thompson who'd believed in me from the start. "Did Mason contact you?" I asked. He chuckled. "He did. Gave me a whole pitch about partnership opportunities. And I told him no. Mason's charming, I'll give him that. But he doesn't have your vision, Harper. He's chasing trends. You're building something real." Relief flooded through me. "Thank you." "Don't thank me. Just keep doing what you're doing. You're going to be very successful." I hung up feeling vindicated. Mason could copy the concept, but he couldn't copy the heart behind it. That same afternoon, Dad called. His voice was cold. "You need to include Mason in your projects. You're making the family look divided." "I'm running a business, Dad. Not a family charity. You're being selfish. And you're ruining the family image." Something inside me snapped. Years of biting my tongue. Years of staying quiet to keep the peace. I don't owe Mason anything. I built this myself. Watch your attitude. No. I'm done watching my attitude. I'm done shrinking myself to make you comfortable. Silence. Then he hung up. I stood there, phone in hand, shaking. But not with fear. With freedom. The second property's grand opening was even bigger than the first. I'd transformed an old warehouse into 12 individual studio spaces. Artists, photographers, a graphic designer, a small tech startup. All of them signed leases. The local business journal wrote a feature. The mayor showed up and praised the project as a model for community development. I stood in the center of that renovated space, surrounded by people who believed in what I'd built and felt genuinely proud. My phone rang during the reception. I almost didn't answer. But I did. "I'm busy right now," I said. "Too busy for my family?" His voice had that familiar edge of manipulation. "Yes, actually. I'm at my second property opening. The one you said I'd fail at." Silence. "You're making a mistake, Harper. This attitude, no. The mistake was spending my whole life trying to earn approval I was never going to get. I don't owe you or Mason anything." I hung up before he could respond. My hands were steady. My voice had been calm. For the first time in a conversation with my father, I hadn't apologized. Hadn't backed down. Hadn't made myself smaller. I'd simply told the truth. And it felt incredible. The recognition grew faster than I'd anticipated. Local organizations started reaching out for partnerships. A nonprofit wanted to collaborate on affordable housing. A business incubator requested meeting space. People stopped me on the street to thank me for revitalizing forgotten neighborhoods. Property values in the areas I'd renovated increased. New businesses moved in. The communities were transforming. One afternoon, a historic preservation society contacted me about an old apartment building downtown. It had been abandoned for years. The previous owner was my father. He'd bought it in the 90s as an investment property, but never maintained it. When code enforcement cracked down, he sold it cheap rather than deal with repairs. "We think you'd be perfect to restore it," the director said. "It's a landmark building. 12 units. Beautiful architecture. It just needs someone with vision." He sent me the listing. I recognized it immediately. Dad used to brag about owning it. He'd drive us past when we were kids, pointing it out as proof of his success. Then he'd abandon it when it became inconvenient. I scheduled a tour for the following week. Standing in that building, I felt destiny clicking into place. This wasn't just another project. This was poetic justice. Mason's deal fell apart spectacularly. He'd partnered with some investors on a luxury condo conversion. Big promises. Bigger budget. But the project was mismanaged. Costs spiraled. Permits were delayed. Partners pulled out. Within 3 months the whole thing collapsed. The local business community was small. Word spread fast. My phone exploded with messages from people I hadn't heard from in years. Did you hear about Mason? Is it true your brother lost everything? Have you talked to your family? I hadn't. They hadn't reached out to me since our last argument. But I heard the rumors. Mason had lost most of his investment. His reputation was damaged. His perfect golden boy image was tarnished. Part of me felt bad for him. He was still my brother. But another part, the part that had endured years of comparison and dismissal, felt vindicated. Then Dad called. His voice shook. Not with anger this time. With desperation. Harper, we need to talk. About what? Can you come to the house? It's important. I agreed, more out of curiosity than obligation. This was going to be interesting. Dad looked older when he opened the door. Tired. His confident posture was gone. Mom hovered in the background, looking worried. We sat in the living room, the same room where he'd spent years praising Mason and dismissing me. We're having some financial difficulties, Dad said carefully. I waited. Mason's deal didn't just hurt him. I'd invested significantly. We both did. And now. He trailed off. I stayed silent, letting him struggle through the explanation. We're going to have to downsize. Sell the house. Mom looked away. Dad's pride was physically painful to watch crumble. Then he looked at me. You should help your family. Mason would help you if the situation was reversed. The manipulation was so familiar I almost laughed. Would he? I asked. Would Mason really help me? Because I seemed to remember him trying to steal my investors 6 months ago. Dad flinched. That's different. No. It's not. He leaned forward, desperation creeping into his voice. There's a building. The old apartment building downtown. We were thinking of moving into one of the units. The rent's reasonable and... He stopped. Look at me. The realization hit him the same moment it hit Mom. You bought it, Mom whispered. I nodded. 3 weeks ago. The rental application came through my property manager 4 days later. I was in my office when she called. We've got an application for Unit 3. 2 applicants. But something's weird about it. Different last name on the paperwork, but the handwriting looks familiar. She sent me the scanned documents. I recognized Dad's handwriting immediately. They'd applied under Mom's maiden name and Dad's middle name. Douglas Patterson and Carol Patterson instead of Douglas and Carol Dawson. They were trying to hide. Trying to get into my building without me knowing. The rage I felt was white hot. After everything. After all the dismissal and sabotage and manipulation. They were still trying to deceive me. My property manager waited in line. What do you want me to do? I took a deep breath. Consider my options. I could reject them. I could make them beg. I could humiliate them the way they'd humiliated me. But that wasn't who I wanted to be. Process the application, I said. Standard background check. Standard terms. Full market rent. No family discount. Are you sure? I'm sure. They're just another set of tenants. Treat them exactly like everyone else. The approval went through 2 days later. Move-in was scheduled for the following Saturday. I didn't tell them I knew. I just waited. Move-in day was cold and clear. I arrived at the building early, wearing professional clothes, carrying a leather folder with their lease documents. My property manager had offered to handle it, but I declined. This needed to be me. I stood in the lobby watching through the glass doors as their moving truck pulled up. Dad got out first. Then Mason, who'd apparently come to help. They started unloading boxes, Dad directing traffic like he always did. Then he looked up and saw me through the glass. He froze. His face went white. Mason followed his gaze. The expression on his face was priceless. Confusion. Dawning realization. I opened the door and stepped outside. Good morning, I said pleasantly. Welcome to the building. Dad stared. Harper, what are you? I'm the owner. Didn't you know? Silence. Mason looked between us, trying to understand. Mom got out of the car, saw me and stopped. I have your lease here, I continued, opening the folder. Everything's in order. Rent is due on the 1st of each month. No exceptions. We have quiet hours after 10 p.m. Any maintenance issues should go through the online portal. Dad found his voice. Harper, we didn't know. I know, I said simply. You applied under different names. But I recognized the handwriting. The shame on his face was profound. Welcome to my building, Dad. Dad tried to negotiate 3 days after they moved in. He called me not as a father but as a tenant trying to work an angle. The rent's a bit high, he started. I was hoping we could discuss a reduction. The rent is market rate, I said calmly. It's what everyone in the building pays. But given our relationship doesn't change the lease terms. Every tenant is treated equally. That's policy. I could hear him struggling. His pride fighting with his circumstances. Mason thinks there should be some family consideration. Mason doesn't set policy for my properties. I do. Harper, please. That word. Please. I'd never heard him say it to me before. Not sincerely. The rent is fair, Dad. If you can't afford it, I can recommend some other buildings. But I won't make exceptions. Silence stretched between us. Understood, he finally said. Then he hung up. I sat there for a moment processing what had just happened. For the first time in my entire life, my father was speechless. For the first time, he had no leverage. No authority. No power over me. It felt surreal. And liberating. The electronic rent payments arrived on the 1st of each month. Always on time. Always the exact amount. From Douglas Dawson to Harper Dawson, each notification felt like vindication. My father, who'd spent my entire life telling me I'd never be successful, was now paying me to live in the building I owned. The building he once owned and abandoned. The irony was perfect. Sometimes I'd see him in the lobby collecting mail or taking out trash. We'd nod politely. He'd avoid eye contact. The comfortable authority he always carried was gone. 3 months after they moved in, a community magazine ran a feature story on my work. Local developer transforms neighborhoods with vision and heart. My photo was on the cover. They delivered copies to every business and residence in the downtown area, including my apartment building. I wasn't there when Dad found it in the lobby, but my property manager told me about it. He'd picked up a copy, seen my face on the cover, read the entire article standing there, then carefully set it back down and walked to the elevator. He looked. He paused, searching for words. Proud? Maybe. Is it? I couldn't tell. I could imagine his face. The conflict there. 6 months after they moved in, Mason came to my office unannounced. He looked different. Humbler. The cockiness was gone. I need to tell you something, he said. I waited. The failed deal. It wasn't just bad luck. Dad pushed me into it. He kept saying I needed to go bigger. Take more risks. Be more aggressive. He sat down without being invited. He invested money he didn't have. Pressured me to do the same. When it fell apart, we blamed each other. The partnership we had, the father-son business team he was so proud of, it's gone. I didn't know what to say. We haven't spoken in 3 weeks, Mason continued. He blames me for losing his money. I blame him for pushing me into a bad deal. The perfect relationship he always talked about was fake. It collapsed the moment things got hard. He looked at me with something I'd never seen before. Respect. You were smart to build something separate from him. Something that was yours. After he left, I sat alone in my office processing. The Golden Boy empire had crumbled. The legacy Dad had banked everything on never really existed. It was just pride and pressure and pretense. And now it is gone. My business expanded into 3 cities over the next year. Charlotte, Durham, Asheville. Each location followed the same model. Abandoned properties transformed into affordable creative spaces. Communities revitalized. Local businesses supported it. I was invited to speak at a major real estate development conference. The audience was packed. Investors, developers, city planners. I told my story honestly. The rejection, the doubt, the family that didn't believe in me, the determination to prove them wrong. When I finished, the room erupted in applause. The story went viral. News outlets picked it up. Social media exploded. Local woman revives communities with creative housing vision. My email was flooded with inquiries. Partnership requests. Speaking invitations. Interview requests. 3 days after my speech, I was walking through the lobby of my apartment building when I heard voices. Tenants talking in the hallway. Did you see Harper Dawson's interview? She owns this building. I know. He's incredible. Started from nothing. Dad was standing near the mailboxes. He heard every word. Our eyes met briefly. For the first time, I saw him feel what I'd felt my entire life. Being overshadowed. Being compared. Being found wanting. That evening, he knocked on my door. I almost didn't answer. But curiosity won. Dad stood in my doorway looking smaller somehow. Older. Can I come in? I stepped aside. He didn't sit. Just stood in my living room looking around at the life I'd built. I was wrong, he said quietly. Not dramatic. Not perfect. But honestly. I spent your whole life telling you that you weren't capable. That you'd never be as successful as Mason. I was wrong about all of it. I stayed silent, letting him continue. You were always capable. More than capable. I just refused to see it. I was so focused on Mason, on the legacy I wanted him to carry, that I ignored what you were becoming. His voice cracked slightly. You built something real. Something that matters. Something better than anything I ever did. I felt tears threatening but held them back. I don't need you to say that, I told him. I know what I've built. I know what I'm capable of. Your approval doesn't define me anymore. He nodded. I know. That's what makes this so hard. You don't need me to acknowledge your success. You succeeded despite me. We stood there in silence. Then I said something I never thought I'd say. I forgive you. Not for him. For me. Because holding on to that anger was exhausting. Because I'd won not by destroying him but by building something beautiful. He left quietly. As I watched him walk back to his apartment, the apartment in my building, I understood something profound. Every month when he pays rent, he's not just sending money. He's sending silent acknowledgments. The daughter he dismissed became the woman he could never have imagined. And I was finally completely free.